Welcome to another episode of the Shared Learning Podcast. We're here today with the director of the school, Nik Bishop. Nik, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been tremendous to watch these evolve over the last year or so, and the conversations that we've had and the conversations that you've had in this space have been really enlightening.
They've been a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
To start today, I'm sort of curious on your motorcycle ride into school. What was different after 2 years here at ISS?
I think it's an evolving picture of knowing the people and the routines. You know, any new school that you go into as a director is such a steep learning curve because there's so many people to get to know, so many histories, so many stories, so many reasons why things are done in a certain way. And so 2 years down the line, you know, a lot of that is now in place. And I guess coming on to the topic that we want to get to is, you know, the direction of the school and how we figure that out together. It before coming into a position, you know, you have some ideas of a school based on the school's reputation or the documentation or the PR, you know, glitz and glam that Brent does such a good job with. And then when you unpack it when you first arrive, you know, it's trying to understand what's really important. And, you know, the school values, you know, which I'll talk about this morning, when we talk about learning and well-being and community, those are obviously deeply entrenched in the documentation and how the school sees itself. And when I came in, you know, I was really curious because the learning one, it's like everybody values learning as a school. And what was absent was how do we really define that? And I could see from the snippets of conversation and bits and pieces, you know, when I first came in that, yes, there's been a big focus on in some grade levels or some areas of the school, there's been a CGC focus, or there's been a character first focus, or an IB focus. But seeing it across the whole school, there wasn't the continuity. These through lines weren't evident. And then the other factor is, you know, if you look at me, you could say, you know, most people value health and probably value good food. But which way round do you put them? You could argue that I value good food more than I do health. Maybe I'm going to have a scare in a few months' time or a few years' time, and I'll value health more than I value the good food. But we haven't, as a school, I don't think, really articulated, are any of those three values more than the others? Does the order make a difference? So we've got community and well-being and learning, but they seem to be interchangeable. So, you know, to come back to your original question, you know, what's changed, I think, is having the rich conversations through the school with different teams, different people, different groups, trying to unpack what it is we value in the school, but also to articulate more of this shared understanding, because it's not just about the little pockets that have done a deep dive into character first or a deep dive into CGC. We need to have some more coherence and consistency across the school. And it's not just about these different pockets, but how they all tie in together. And you know that if we were a 3-program IB school, then you would have the learner profile, which, whether you're a PYP or MYP or DP, it's consistent. You know, the through lines are there. You would have the approaches to learning that would give information, give guidance to students and to teachers, how to set about things, their definition of learning. And of course, coming here, that bit really is absent. And so we had these values that were important, but not really, I don't think, telling us where we were going. They were more telling us how to do things. So much of my initial focus was on trying to articulate, trying to get across that we can't just live on the strength of the reputation and the history. We've got to be forward thinking as well. We should be cutting edge. We're not aspiring to mediocrity. We're aspiring to great things in the classroom.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, we've got to be pushing the envelope. We've got to be asking these challenging questions. And that's where vision and mission comes in. You know, a good school from an accreditation lens is one that is mission driven and vision led, not values driven. Values are telling us how we get things done, that we're going to value the people around us, we're going to value our community, but it doesn't necessarily tell us where we're going. So that's why I think over the last couple of years, the focus has been on trying to really get that understood and keep pulling people together in terms of defining learning. And I think your work has been terrific in helping to shape that. We're now at a really interesting flex point, if you like, because our focus is going to be on curriculum development. And I'm really excited with Ben coming in that we can start to see this, developing. It doesn't mean to say that the ACE work, it's disappearing, but the focus has to now be on curriculum. That's what we'd set out to do. And I think all of the ACE work is going to help dovetail and support that, because let's face it, another year or so, and we need to be planning for the next cycle of accreditation. And when we look at the ACE, the new ACE protocol, the 2.0 protocol, we should be able to look at that and say, we understand this now. We're familiar with the language and how this is constructed, and the accreditation is a nice template for us to use. If we're trying to ask ourselves questions about what does a good school look like, that's a great place to start, because a lot of smart people have spent a lot of time in trying to define it and articulate it. So long-winded answer to my bike ride into school in the morning.
Well, there's a lot probably that goes on in those rides for sure. But I'm really, you alluded to conversations that we've had in this room and that we've had throughout the building. I think my great experience has been to have excellent conversations with people who have real deep expertise in different areas of learning and teaching. So I want to know how we move from these areas or these pockets of expertise to really helping the whole school, the whole organization learn together.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't want to, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We've got some terrific experts, some very well educated, well-crafted people that are terrific with what they do. That's not the challenge. The challenge is trying to help people understand what else is going on,
right,
and where there's synergy that can be made together.
Yeah, that's right.
So you may be a terrific practitioner of English in the high school, but how do other people know what good looks like there? Or how would you get to spend time in different parts of the school to understand the challenges and the nuance in the middle school or the primary school or the early years? And I think trying to find opportunities for people to observe other lessons and to have this dialogue. And so again, the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years, to me, it's important that we've created some space and some time.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst it may not have been maybe people aren't clear all the time what the purpose is. But to me, giving space and time to talk about what's most important to us. We're a school that is focused about learning, as all schools should be. We need to create space and time so people can talk about the experiences of children learning, the challenges and the pedagogy around it. And the challenge, I think, is to see these threads, how are we developing children from early years right the way through to graduating? What's important to us? And we spent some time looking at character traits and these 21st century skills, because with ChatGPT, with the world that is evolving, content isn't king anymore. You know, the processes, the skills, the understanding, the intuition to understand whether something being presented is authentic or not, and to be able to ask the right questions and to work with other people. You know, all of these 21st century learning skills are so valuable. But what does it look like in the high school or the middle school or the primary school? That's where we need to find time to come together. And it doesn't feel a natural fit all the time, because as a high school teacher talking to a primary school teacher, there's less tangibles that you can sit down and say, oh yeah, you know, we're dealing with these same children.
The content is not the same.
No. So but putting teams together to give the opportunities to talk, my hope is that people will then be able to start seeing the common threads. So the things that are important in a primary school and the things that are important at high school, how do we make sure that they happen? Not just by happen chance. It's not just by accident. We want to make sure it's intentional, that these skills and attitudes towards learning are developed. And I think that's our challenge. So that's where this defining learning is important, because it helps us to focus on how are we going to be intentional as teachers to develop these skills and strategies for children as they grow older.
It's really interesting because we've spent a lot of time in the last 2 years talking about student agency. But to me, this kind of process, giving time and space to us as teachers, is a kind of agency in itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I love it when we see things like, I don't know, the tech tapas or the ace tapas, because I think naturally we expect the students to be taking the risks and, you know, putting themselves out and, you know, taking themselves out of the comfort zone. But as teachers, there's this funny duality. On the one hand, you say, well, what have I got that nobody else has got? You know, why would coming to my lesson be any different to going to somebody else's? So you're not wanting to big yourself up and say, hey, come and look at me. You know, you tend to put yourself down, but those opportunities for seeing what other people are doing, it means a bit of risk taking. I'm prepared, you know, if it was a tech tapas, to stand there and say how to use Excel, or, you know, how to make sure your software is going to be secure or whatever. So you're having to expose that vulnerability and put yourself out for criticism, but at the same time not being big-headed and saying, hey, I'm the big I am. And it's a subtle art. So when I see people sharing those opportunities, or somebody wanting to share something, or, you know, here's a new piece of software, have a look at this, or, you know, whatever. To me, that's terrific, because it shows that people feel comfortable to share some ideas and to share some thoughts that, you know, nobody puts themselves out there to be criticized. Well, not most people.
Right.
They're usually a little bit reluctant to be criticized. So the fact that they're doing that, you know, I think is terrific. That's the agency where you can stand and say, hey, this is a technique I'm using for, you know, English literature. It may not have direct relevance to middle school, but they may be able to see some things and say, hey, I hadn't thought of that. That's some great ideas. So all of these opportunities to get across subjects and across divisions, I think helps to promote that. And if you look at the IB as one model, because it is very well articulated across all the different parts, you know, there is a big focus there on, you know, transdisciplinary themes, because they want people to collaborate professionally. And we have some great professionals, but it takes space and time to encourage people to come together and share the ideas.
It's really interesting. I want to pick up on a couple of the things that you just said. You know, in this role, I've been really fortunate to be able to have different conversations with people. And two things happen. One, people kind of often say, well, what am I doing that's so special? And it's true what you've mentioned. I think as teachers, what we typically do in the classroom, we just sort of take for granted. We don't always see the opportunities that we have to share our insights with other people. And I've experienced that firsthand, being able to walk in primary school and middle school and around the school to see that actually there are a lot of things that I can pick up on, even if the content's the same, not the same. There are a lot of things that I can pick up on in my own teaching practices. It's really interesting to find different ways to allow all staff to engage in those kinds of learning opportunities, to learn from each other, to walk in different classrooms.
Oh, I agree. And, in this venue here, you've had Sarah talking about, successes in DT.
That's right.
DT is a great example because, if the children are involved in a DT project or an art project or anything, writing an English essay, there isn't anything until they start creating it. And it's important that there's then an iterative process. They've got a goal in mind. They've got a problem to solve, whatever it is that they're trying to do. And their first attempt isn't a failure. The first attempt is just feedback on what didn't work. They thought cutting out like this would work, but actually when it's cut out, it breaks apart. So they need to go back and to reevaluate. So there's some terrific examples of that around the school. And I think that's what, I like about these podcasts is you've been able to draw out from that experiences, of the tactile stuff that the design we're doing for the younger children, that maybe other people wouldn't have been able to see, because there is only certain finite time that we can get out and see what else is going on in the school. And the podcasts are a good way of sharing those insights. And again, I know that you've had Sandy and Carol talking here. If you just look at the skill development through those, major productions, and what's happening between the children, they're forming a great community. They are looking out for each other, and they're learning so many skills along the way. But it takes huge courage from the students to actually, get up on stage and sing and dance and things. My hat's off to them. They really do blow me away with the courage that they just go gung-ho and go into these productions, but they learn so many collaborative and cooperative skills along the way.
You talked about creation towards the future. What are we creating here at ISS?
The process of creation and co-creation in a school it's a little bit tricky. If you were to, let's advance the clock a year when we start to put together the next accreditation blurb to send off. You could quite happily write it all. But that's not what it's about. It's about co-creating and to pull in different people's ideas. So when we are having ACE meetings, when we're talking about some of the visioning statements, it's about trying to create it together. And that can be, it's exciting, but it can be a bit frustrating because not everybody's tuned into that. Some people want to just focus on getting their class ready or getting the reports done or the marking done. Whereas other people really get excited by these more different set of drivers, really. But I'm trying to create we're on the front foot, not on the back foot. I want to see as progressive, forward-thinking school, and doing things that are really appropriate for the children for now. Giving them the skills and the knowledge and the attributes that they need now, but also helping them prepare for their futures. And it's an uncertain future that we're going into. So we have to try to really think about the skills and the knowledge and understanding that they're going to be needing in their futures in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. So much of that is crafted around, the right approaches to learning. So yeah, trying to create this environment where, look, nobody sets out to be wrong. Well, nobody sets out to make mistakes. But we shouldn't be so fearful that, we ignore doing the right things for the fear of not doing things right. We have to take some risks sometimes. We have to be brave enough to say, why are we doing all of this? It may have been relevant 5, 10, 20 years ago, but is it going to hold that same relevance in 5, 10, 20 years' time? And so to challenge those assumptions, it is a risk. And we need to have the courage sometimes to say, well, if we want to have this progressive school, we can't just add more stuff in. We've got to be discerning and start taking things out to make the space for these project-based learning experiences, for these inquiry-based learning experiences. And that it's not just about content being delivered. It's about making sure that the students have got a sense of, their own moral compass and a sense for what's right or wrong. I did some GPT searches on the school, coming up with stuff about the school. And it comes up with absolute rubbish. It's absolute garbage, making it up. But if you don't know that, how would you know that it's garbage? So it's like saying to children, how do we estimate the size of something? That comes, how do you teach estimation? A lot of that comes from experience, but reflection and this iterative process of, oh, I thought a centimeter was about this big, and clearly I'm wrong, and you get closer and closer so that you can estimate more accurately. But without a sense of estimation, so many things on your computer or your calculator or, ChatGPT, you've got no idea if it's correct. And we could be blindly going down a road of having children quite happily accept whatever technology spits out at them with no sense of right or wrong. But how do we develop that? And if that's important to us, how do we make sure we put that in without it just being content driven? It's some tricky conversations to have, but we need to have the courage to say, this is going to be important for us.
And I think part of the courage comes from having an environment, sort of a collegial environment where not only is it okay to take risks, but that you can rely on one another as you go through that process to give you some reliable feedback and think about what's working. Oh, have you thought it from this perspective?
Yeah.
And for me, having these kinds of conversations is really critical. As you sort of take risks, you have to find a way to orient yourself towards the future.
But it's a critical risk, and it's a critical friend that you're looking for. Right. And if we have trust and courage, trust in our colleagues, that we assume best intention rather than assuming that, I don't know, you're going to get in trouble or whatever. And that the questions you're going to ask is the critical friend trying to challenge my assumptions so that the outcome, the product, can be a better one at the end. So yeah, I think that's where some exciting times, because clearly with this curriculum review coming up, there's going to be some difficult questions and far-reaching ones. But how are we intentional in developing children from the early years right the way through ECPS, through into middle and into high school? We can't just assume that those vertical threads are there. I think we need to really look carefully at them.
So last question. You're right into school next year or the following year. What will be different then?
As we look to the future, we know that demographics and the economic situation changes. The number of families here that They don't have expatriate contracts. They're coming in on local contracts now. This is going to continue to put pressure on us. What is it that differentiates ISS as a school, that makes us the school of choice compared to Norwegian schools or BIS, which financially would perhaps be more appealing to people? But it's this special place, special because the relationships that our staff have with each other, but also with the students, the nurturing, wanting the children to thrive, that comes through very clearly. I want us to develop an even stronger curriculum model so that is really an attraction. Plus all of the bits that go on to it, all of the ECAs and MUN and, athletics trips and things like this make ISS a really special place. But we've got to think about what makes us competitive in this environment. And we've got to remain competitive. We can't just sit back and assume that this is a gravy train that's just going to keep on giving. This is serious work that we have to put in to make sure that we are ahead of the game, that we are the school of choice. And we have to keep honing that knife to make sure it's really sharp for these children, because they only get one chance. This is their one chance. We can redo things. We get a second chance at, running that class. The kids don't get that chance. So we've got to try to make it the best we can.
Nik, thanks so much for your time today.
Scott, thank you.